Hello everyone, and welcome to my review for Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 246, and also a Merry Christmas Eve, as this is the day I'm recording this review. It's the last review of the year, and also, funnily enough, it's the day that everything going on in the manga takes place. Except like 5 years in the past. So, that's neat. What a funny coincidence. Also today is the official Viz release day, so, yeah, kind of funny how it all worked out like that. But before we get into this week's review, as always, if you haven't already, definitely be sure to like and subscribe. I'd like to try and hit at least 100 likes on this week's review. Now then, without any further ado, let's get right down to business, shall we? So, we start off this week's chapter with a very good color page spread, the Ryomen Sukuna Raid in Makyo Shinjuku. The sort of dark red background of this, and just sort of showing all of the characters that will be involved in this arc to some extent, really reminds me of that one spread that we got in Shibuya. I think it was in like part 25. I think that's when we got it. I'm pretty sure it was during the Dagon fight, which is very helpful because when I do the top 5 chapters of the year video in a few days, I planned on using that spread because I think this year is very comparable to the year where we got most of Shibuya in terms of quality. So thank you, Gege, for giving me this very convenient spread I can use for like a comparison of sorts. Now, we start off the chapter basically right where the last one ended, with Higuma and Kusakabe getting hit by cleave. Or nah, I think this one's dismantle. Yeah, this one they're getting hit with is dismantle. It seems we're getting a better distinction between the two of those abilities, because I always thought it was kind of dumb that dismantle was one big cut, while cleave was a series of smaller slashes. But it seems in this case it's actually dismantle is his ranged attack, and cleave is his touch attack. I think. At least that's what the Viz translation says. The TCB translation says that dismantle is just the projectile slash, and cleave activates once it touches a target. So dismantle will cut anything that gets in its way, and cleave is just gonna cut whatever he's aiming at. I guess. We get better distinction on the difference between the slashes. Sukuna's technique is cutting things. Well, part of his technique is cutting things. It's nice to have a little distinction between the specifications of each variation. We also get something good here at the start of the chapter, which is Higuma acknowledging his own lack of battle experience. Because that's one of the most important things when it came to the end of last week's chapter. 2 things, really. It's so interesting. A lot of the things over the last year are things where a lot of people really don't like it when it comes out. And I see it initially, and I'm like, okay. And then I think about it for a little bit after the fact. And I go, oh, never mind, actually, this is pretty good. The whole confiscation situation is pretty good. A lot of people wondered how Higuruma and the others didn't account for something like this being a possibility when they went over so much. They took so many things into account when thinking about how Higuruma would play into this strategy, but didn't account for Sukuna having a curse tool. Now, it confiscating the curse tool instead of a technique makes sense based on how, frankly, inefficient confiscation is when you look at how it played out in Yuji's fight and how its function was explained. It'd be so much more efficient if it just always took away the target's cursed energy, but it doesn't. It goes for the most surface level weapon they have. So it makes sense that happened. They did not account for this because, 1, they didn't know Sukuna had any cursed weapons, and 2, Higuruma is a person who's lacking in battle experience. He has barely been a sorcerer for 2 months. He has not had that many high-level fights. A lot of the people that he killed in the culling game were probably just shitters who died really quickly. So, yeah, that makes sense. And then you have Sukuna, who has some of the most battle experience of any character in the series. He saw how Higuruma's domain worked when Yuji got put in it, and might have thought, I wonder how a curse tool would interact with this. Let's find out. So, that's how that played out. And Higuruma himself acknowledges the fact that my lack of battle experience is showing here. Fortunately, we have Kusakabe here. Kusakabe, a guy who we did not really give any respect until very recently, because he's just shown himself to be insanely knowledgeable and competent for a person at his level of power. And also, his simple domain might have saved Higuruma's life. At the very least, it severely reduced the damage of those slashes they got hit with. And he provides most of the insight we get into Sukuna's abilities. He gives us the first acknowledgement of Sukuna's fire arrow outside of Jogo. And also goes, yeah, we don't know why he's using that. We have no idea what would push him to use it. And there's nothing we would really be able to do against that anyway. So there is no point in us worrying about it all the time, because it's going to make us hesitate. And we're not going to be able to win this if we're constantly second-guessing ourselves. He also brings up something that we haven't discussed in a little bit, which is that the world-cutting slash definitely has some kind of binding vow applying to it, because that's how altering the targeting conditions of a technique typically works. If I had to guess, the time it took Sukuna to alter the conditions, the targeting conditions of his technique, was probably him figuring out the exact parameters of the binding vow he was going to use. Now, we don't know what the parameters are yet, because we didn't see him use the cut on Gojo, and, well, we did see him use it on Kashimo, and he used hand signs and chanting then. So, we don't know what sort of binding vow there might be attached to it other than that, but it's probably pretty safe to say he didn't use hand signs or chanting when he used it on Gojo, because he only had one hand, and Gojo would have probably noticed him doing a chant, so it must be something else. And it may even be possible that the hand signs and the chant are enough to basically substitute the binding vow if he has an opportunity to use them. It's too many uncertainties. It's basically what Kusakabe is talking about here, is we don't know the parameters, and there's not really any point in us worrying about it constantly until we just see what happens. Worrying about it is not going to do anything. So, you know what? We're just going to wait and find out what happens with that. Now, again, although they didn't confiscate the shrine, they did still get the death penalty. We got the Executioner Sword. As long as we can hit Sukuna with it, we can kill him. So, it's not the absolute worst case scenario. We've still got a way, it's just clearing the path's going to be a little more difficult. Kusakabe gets a pretty cool little moment here where he's like, listen, we're going to get this done. I'm going to protect you even if it costs me my life. Wait, did I really just say that? Am I going to die here? I hope not. You're great. You're great, Kusakabe. And, the kids need a good teacher like you. So, survive this. Now, Sukuna. Sukuna's doing a little bit of analysis of everything here. He's pretty chill. Because even though he's got a bunch of people charging at him at once, got a very competent New Shadow style user here, and a guy with a one-hit killing sword, he's chilling. He's big chilling. Just casually playing the game. Got a little bored. So he's decided to, play around with the people on offense right now. So he totally speed blitzes Chozo, completely avoids piercing blood while it's still firing. So, moving faster than the speed of sound. Double donuts him. This is not something you see every day, folks. on average, when someone gets washed, it's a singular donut. One singular arm-sized hole through a man's torso. Chozo gets 2 here today. Very unfortunate. We don't know if Chozo knows reverse curse technique. I don't think we've had any indication of him knowing it. So that's a pretty serious injury. Fortunately, it didn't immediately kill him. And it's impossible for Chozo to bleed to death because of his technique. So, you know, he'll be fine. But, you know, not feeling great. Something happens here that I and a lot of other people didn't really notice initially, is that Nanami's cleaver gets thrown at Sukuna, and then he blocks it with one of his arms. Ino, I don't know why you decided to throw the weapon that you need to, I assume, hit someone with while holding your hand? I don't know. I mean, I guess as long as it hits with the blade, it would still work. I think it may have just hit the flat end. But Ino jumps in, and he hits Sukuna with Nanami's cleaver. Sukuna blocks it. But the impact to 7-3 is still pretty strong, you know? It's pushing him down a little bit. The ground is imploding underneath Sukuna's feet. And this is where Sukuna acknowledges that they've turned Nanami's technique into a curse tool. I suppose there are 2 paths through which this could have happened. Either just, you know, his constant use of his signature weapon, or I'm pretty sure the bath process that Urayume was performing in the Zenin HQ, they said that was, you know, the process for making curse tools, which means that they took Nanami's remains and they, like, put it through a food processor and turned it into a curse tool, which is quite fucked up. And a really bad ending for Nanami, who really did just kind of want to eventually get away from all this stuff. Now he never will. But, you know, I love Nanami. I love 7-3. That cleaver's iconic. And the color contrast Ino gets from using it is really cool. Of course, Ino's kind of the weakest person here, so he just immediately gets kicked away. Yuji and Kusakabe run in, they get slashed up a little bit, but they're just trying to provide an opening for Higuruma, who leaps in, and Sukuna literally dodges it by a hair, which is not shocking given how fast he is. Then he grabs Higuruma by the arm, and just starts beating the piss out of him. And then decides to play a little game with Yuji, where he throws Higuruma away, and then runs after him. And Yuji is not fast enough to keep up with this man. Yuji's fast, but he's not Sukuna fast. Now, we don't know if Maki was going full speed back when her and Yuji teamed up against Sukuna, but if she was, and Yuji was able to keep up, I'm pretty sure this means that Sukuna physically is at least faster than people like Maki and Toji. But, you know, I don't think Maki was going, like, max speed. Then she would just be fucking teleporting. It was just, we're gonna kick this up a notch. You know, I'm gonna go as fast as you can go, Yuji. Right now, Sukuna is faster than that. So, Yuji, just in this terrible situation here, is not fast enough to catch up to Sukuna and stop him from getting to Higuruma. As we get this really cool panel of Sukuna just like a silhouette. The only thing that's glowing is his tattoos, and you can see just from the silhouette, he's doing his hand signs. So he's powering up these slashes as they cut through this building. These are much more powerful slashes than the ones he's been using to just kind of play around with these guys. And then we get into a flashback. And we find out that Higuruma is our guy for saving Megumi, because the Executioner's Sword does discriminate. And if Sukuna is the one that's primarily in control of Megumi's body, I think it's pretty safe to assume that his soul is completely overwhelmed Megumi's body. That's why it's changed shape to have Sukuna's shape. I think it's fairly safe to say that if Sukuna gets hit with the Executioner's Sword, it's going to kill Sukuna and not Megumi. So theoretically, this should allow them to both kill Sukuna and save Megumi, which is great. However, of course, Higuruma is severely lacking in combat experience, and he does not know reverse curse technique to heal himself. So him deciding to go into this high-level battle as like his second ever serious fight is pretty much a death sentence for him. And Higuruma himself acknowledges, after everything that's happened to him and after everything that he's done, it's probably right for him to die here after doing this. This is his punishment. Which Yuji, of course, is able to relate to. We now have this wonderful parallel between Yuji and Higuruma and their guilt for their perceived crimes. Though, of course, Higuruma did commit some actual crimes of murder. It's just really cool for them to have this dynamic here. It's really great. You know, Higuruma's already great, Yuji's already great. I love when these two have synergy with each other. I don't remember if I ever imagined Higuruma, you know, helping Yuji out with fighting Sukuna. I must have thought of it at some point. I at least knew he'd help him out with his, you know, his trial, you know, when he's put on trial for his crimes. But, you know, having Higuruma come along to levy judgment against the true culprit behind the Shibuya massacre and the one responsible for so much of Yuji's suffering is just great. It's such a great role to put Higuruma in. And this is the part where we remember that Higuruma is a guy who reached the level of a grade 1 sorcerer in like 2 weeks. And, you know, is the only character, I think, that became a sorcerer and immediately got their domain expansion and then basically had to learn how to be a sorcerer in reverse. The man's a prodigy. As we see here, he figured out how to use domain amplification after watching it in use in the Gojo Sukuna fight. He was watching and learning. And now we have to wonder what else he's going to learn, because even Sukuna himself is enthralled. He's mesmerized by Higuruma's talent. His talent is almost unmatched, because this is a man with raw talent that rivals even Gojo Satoru. So we get this fantastic final page with Higuruma here, looking so cool. This guy, he's something else. You know, he's become powerful at a rate very few other characters can compare to. The only one really comparable is Mahito, in terms of, like, growth that we've seen, or at least, you know, put in perspective for the very short span over which that growth has occurred, you know? For people whose growth we saw in the story, from, like, where they started off to where they ended up, these two are the guys. Now, I imagine we're probably going to get some kind of short exchange here of Higuruma managing to defend himself against Sukuna, and then Yuji's going to catch up. You know, Higuruma is not fending off Sukuna on his own for an extended period of time. No one here is. But he can probably buy himself a few moments, and that will be enough. What's the next thing Higuruma's going to learn? Presumably, he's going to learn a reverse curse technique, because that's the thing that gets brought up as him not knowing how to do it this chapter. And it was another thing put on showcase a lot in the Gojo and Sukuna fight, which Higuruma was watching and he's already learned something from. Everyone who meets this guy says the same thing. This guy's a genius. So a lot of the stuff seen there, he's probably going to be figuring out how to do, maybe even altering the conditions of his domain, if for some reason he casts it again. Higuruma, you know, he's going to be one of the MVPs of this fight. Which, you know, you probably could have guessed, since him and Yuji were the first two to arrive on the scene. You know, these guys are going to be the MVPs. They're going to be the best players here. They're our most important cards. And of course, again, at the very least, even if we don't manage to kill Sukuna here, we're buying time for Yuta and Maki to show up after Kenjaku's dealt with. Which presumably we're going to cut back to at some point. You know, probably in a few chapters. Because I imagine the big conclusion of the series, the big final battle, the last stretch, is going to be when these two things converge. perhaps even in a more literal sense with the whole merger thing going on. Who knows? But yeah, this chapter was great, in large part because Higuruma was in it, and we got a lot of cool Higuruma stuff out of it. It was a really good chapter to end the year on for a year of great JJK chapters. This has just been a fantastic year for the series. I know a lot of people got filtered. There were a lot of people that didn't like some of the stuff that happened, and they left. But for those of us who stuck through it and who, liked what happened, thought it was pretty good, this year's just been fantastic. It's just been phenomenal. And I can't wait to see what we're going to get next year. Because at this rate, looking at where we were last year to where we are now, 2024 is the last year for the series. I cannot imagine it going on for like another 40 chapters. We're not getting that far. I imagine we'll probably be done by like late summer, maybe in the fall. But not going into 2025. I don't see that happening unless this kind of gets dragged out. Because this has not been getting rushed, and it's not been getting dragged out. We're at pretty good normal pacing right now. So we are just going to have to wait and see what happens. But with that, that's all I've got for this week's review. If you guys enjoyed, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss any of my uploads. I do Jujutsu Kaisen chapter reactions and reviews every week that we get a new chapter. If you enjoy discussing Jujutsu Kaisen with other people, or you just enjoy the content I produce in this channel, I highly suggest you check out my Discord server. I have a link to that down in the description. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys around. Take care.